Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the summer series, courtesy of our friends, the Ivy College of Business. Today I'm joined by my good pal and coworker, Rob. Welcome to the pod, Rob.
Good to be with you, Jackie. I'm a little bit I got a little bit of a sinus
Yep, stuffed
issue,
up.
a little swollen up a little bit, but
Yeah.
otherwise good to go and ready to chat.
I did hear that there was something going around. So it might not just be you.
Well, misery loves company, as they say. So that's good news.
Well, I appreciate you being here despite your stuffy nose. I'm sure you can't really see it on camera, so we'll get it rolling. But I was just telling you, we literally haven't recorded a podcast together since probably my first or second year. And I'm going into my like 8th year, I think it is. So it's been a while. It's been a
Well,
while.
Chris likes to, just pull me out here every now and
Yeah.
then, in rare occasions. I think that probably says a lot about the downloads when I'm
He's
interviewed.
hiding
So,
you.
yeah, so keep well, I'm busy enough with the writing and all that stuff, but yeah, that's been a long time, but great to join you. I mean, it's going to
Yeah.
be a fun year of Iowa State athletics for sure.
I know. And you were just telling me this is your 25th year as a sports writer.
Yep.
This is so exciting. It's a milestone year. I can't believe I didn't know that. Are you excited? How does it feel?
I feel old, I mean, but that's okay. Yeah, I started at 2000 at the Register after interning there. Obviously, I got a little bit of a non-traditional start because I got a film degree first and didn't really do
Oh,
anything with it.
okay.
Chose not to do anything with it, to be honest. Was cowardly, to be honest. I didn't want
Okay.
to move to LA and give it a shot. But yeah, I didn't even realize it until I thought about it. Started with Register 2000. Yeah, we're right there. Stayed at the Register for 2000 to 2010, and then started doing stuff with Chris and the Gazette. Bounced back and forth. Now I'm doing stuff for both.
Yeah.
It's been a topsy turvy journey through this wild and some often disheartening media landscape in the last 25 years.
So you said you got a film degree. So was film what you ultimately thought you were going to do then?
Yeah, I mean, this was at the University of Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Twins.
And yeah, I was taking, in part because I was such a terrible student my first 2 years and almost flunked out. By the end, it took me a long time to get my 4-year degree, and I was taking graduate level film courses to fill up my allotment, and I loved it. And the harder the classes got, or the more I guess involved or arcane or uh, philosophically intricate, I did better.
Yeah.
Because I was engaged, and I thought it'd be fun to get into film and maybe help with just helping anyway. And then I was like, oh my God, all these people in my graduate level film courses wearing their berets and looking down at me for wearing a polo shirt. These are the people I'll be meeting in LA.
Yeah.
I said, you know what? Instead, I think I'll get some menial jobs and save up some money and travel the world a little bit and do a lot of damage to myself, but also have a lot of great times with myself. So that's what I did. And when I was in the wilderness before coming back to Iowa State and getting the journalism degree.
Mm-hmm. And then you intern at the Register. So how do we get to sports writing?
Well, it started with sports.
Okay.
So it was a build up to an Olympic year, and when my good friend and editor at the time, Bryce Miller, and the late great Randy Brubaker, we were big on making any Iowa ties that you could at the Olympics, and I got the assignment of doing a number of features on people who had obscure Iowa ties, but had interesting stories for how they got to things like rowing or excuse me, this and that in the Olympics, and they were impressed by those. And I covered everything from tennis, high school tennis, to whatever needed to be covered. And I always tried to tell a story. I mean, I even then, there were still a lot of straight gamers being produced. And now outside of AP stories where everyone will read when they go to ESPN.com right after a game, it's not this episodic, just straight, here's blah, 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 point A, point B, point C, not a whole lot of color. I always tried to, whether it be humanizing a certain person involved in the event or a certain moment in the event or whatever, I always wanted to tell more of a story. And I think that ties into to my interest in film, because that's ultimately storytelling of the visual sort. And I think maybe I would have been better at that if I take, but you needed a lot of opportunities to break your way for
Yeah.
that to happen. But so that's kind of my deal. And then they offered me the full-time job. It was a senior news assistant, so I had to still work the phones.
Oh,
They'd call
okay.
in scores and pissed off coaches after they got beat. Yeah, I don't have the other team stats. I'm like, okay. So paid the dues, eventually got full-time at the register, and then eventually had young kids. It just wasn't tenable with the workload that they were
Mhm.
asking. Wife is a really well-paid job that she doesn't like it in pharmacy. Excuse me. But again, the money was there. So,
Yeah.
I adapted, spent a little bit more time at home, got back in daycare costs,
Mhm.
did a little bit less. And then as kids got older, now I'm ramping up and doing a little
Yep.
bit more over the last couple of years, which has been fun.
When you talk about the way you wanted, to tell those stories, when you started writing and really getting into like, okay, this is going to be my journey, this is going to be where my career kind of takes off, did you always know that's kind of the focus you wanted, or is that something you kind of learned along the way?
That's a good question. I think it always was my focus. I'd want to pull something out that was like a narrative element of an event, or even just doing a feature on a person. You want to
Mhm.
find something that's a thread that you can hook people with the lead about, and then fill in more details, which are hopefully all really interesting too. And then the whole idea is you circle back to that lead and you unify it with some really good quote and a really good finish. So it feels kind of like a short film in
Mhm.
a way. Sometimes I feel like I've been very successful in that. Sometimes, whether it's, it's like, you know, LeBron, Jason Tatum, they have their off nights, and,
Yeah.
I have my off nights too. But usually if I've got good material, I'm going to produce something at least pretty darn good. And that's my goal. And I mean, I know it's kind of old school. I mean, people, I'll do an analysis stories. I think it's usually pretty surface level, just because I'm also writing for a newspaper audience, and
Mhm.
while they are perfectly capable of going in depth, you also want to appeal to
Right.
everyone. So yeah, a roundabout way of answering, but I think it's always been there, and always something I want. Like if I can write a game story in which very little of the scoring summary occurs in the story,
Yeah.
uh, I'll do that.
See, and I feel like when I started at CF, CW always says this till this day, that you're one of the best writers in the state of Iowa. And I don't think he's wrong, because I
Thank you.
think you do that really well. Like you said, you feel that you're able to kind of give like that filmmaking element in the way you write about things, and you do. I think you do such a great job of like coming out of a game and saying, okay, it wasn't about how many touchdowns someone got or how many yards, and you make it about what was the atmosphere like? What were the fans sounding like? What did the players' facial expressions look like? That's something I want to do. I want to grow up to be just like you. So I
Well,
do. I think you do that really, really well.
well, thank you. And I know you've grown a lot in that regard too. I mean, as you've written more and more about wrestling and all that. So no, I really appreciate that. There are tricks to all this too, of course, because
Mhm.
I had a career in Deadline, on
Yeah, very
Deadline. And
different
while I
than I
don't
do.
necessarily have that at CF, when you've got games kicking off at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, you've still got to wrap up as quick as you can. So
Right.
I spend less time thinking about my lead than I do about what's a angle that not many people are going to take. Like if somebody has a great game, I mean, they
Mhm.
did virtually nothing wrong. Sometimes my lead is the one thing they did wrong,
Yeah.
you know, and then that's a way to talk about how great they were too. But you sometimes get a funny quote about, okay, so you were men's basketball or something. So you were 10 of 11 from the field, 4 or 5 from three, you scored 28 points or whatever it was. Well, what happened with that air ball in the second quarter? And they might just laugh and say something funny about it.
Mhm.
They just trying to look a little bit different. And I think people appreciate also seeing that they're quote unquote heroes.
Yeah.
When you can reveal the flaws and they know the flaws are there and they're willing happily to talk about them. I've never done that and had somebody be like, I did everything great. And you're asking me about that. They always think it's funny.
Yeah.
So, that's just one approach, but there are so many approaches that you can capture the color and the the behind scenes stuff in the moment that people aren't privy to, even if they're watching it on a news conference feed or whatever, that you can easily get into and can just go with. Those aren't the best ones, but those are the ones that are very serviceable, and you can get, there's some go-to tricks to just kind of quickly provide some of that added again color.
Is that something you kind of learned over time with experience, or did you get that from maybe people who inspired you in your writing? Like, how did you learn to, like you said, think of the angle as the game's happening and as you're going through interviews and stuff?
I think to some extent it was always there, but I mean, certainly, when I got in, like when I started working at the Register, because I'd taken these grad level film courses and all this, I was using words that many people did not know.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've probably forgotten them. And that's okay, because you don't want to put those words in a story about this, the state doubles tennis, boys tennis meet, at Birdland Park. It just, so he got me to work on it. That's not dumbing down. It's just not, it's like I was showing off maybe a little bit, and I wasn't thinking of it that way, because I felt like sometimes those words are really more precise.
Yeah.
In terms of description, but they're not. If you're going to put in words that most people don't understand, you're doing a disservice to the reader, right? So he was like, just don't do that. He helped me a bit with how to structure things after the lead and in between, and versus just trying to be very literary. I tried to be very literary, and I kind of prided myself on that. Occasionally I have flourishes of that still, but it's, again, tamped down.
Yeah.
And you're not when you use big words, if it comes naturally, and they did come naturally for me, but it's generally a turnoff. I mean, it comes off as if you're showing off, I think. And that's never anything you want to do. It makes you not very relatable, for sure.
So when, you spend how many years, you said, how many years did you say you spent at the Register?
I left in 2010.
Okay. So talk about the transition from the Register. You went straight to working with
Actually,
Chris?
I didn't.
Okay.
I had this opportunity, and at the time I was kind of nervous about it, but pretty lowballed price to be the director of media relations at Iowa Speedway.
Okay.
And that was a time of transition. I mean, they'd done a lot. I mean, I'd been there from the very beginning, the groundbreaking of the place with Rusty Wallace with his shovel sitting in a, freaking bulldozer, but cat, kind of thing. So I'd been there from the very beginning. And I thought they really wanted somebody that like gave media relations, and that I was kind of like the secretary to the president or CEO, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't very rewarding. So I was out in about 3 months, and the ownership changed, I think, pretty quickly after that. So that was a type of baptism, I guess you would renounce. You'd be like, I made a mistake, and it would, no fault. I appreciated the opportunity, but yeah, and stuff was opening up with Chris, and I can't remember, because that stuff opened. It's been so back and forth, and as I said early on, I'm getting pretty old. It's kind of hard to put all the dates together, but yeah, I did have that brief stint on the so-called dark side, and it wasn't for me. Situation maybe to some extent too, and I know they're doing great stuff there now, and it's cool to see. But yeah, that was the little interim period.
How'd you meet Chris? How does that happen?
We met covering Iowa State stuff, and I was mainly UNI football writer then, and I'd cover like the Valley hoops, like the UNIs and the Drakes. I was the main auto racing guy, which I'm sure helped us connect, because it's hard to believe that I was for years. I mean, because now I don't do any of it.
Right.
For a while, NASCAR.com would pay me when they bring out the Xfinity series or truck series and they, stop doing that. And then of course they went Cup. and they've consolidated a little bit. That was a sweet gig, by the way. It's one of the
It sounds like it.
best paying gigs in freelance journalism. But so I'm sure, again, I'm sure we connected that way.
Mm-hmm.
He loved racing. I didn't love racing, but I enjoyed covering it because again, you get different stories like wrestling, niche sports.
Mm-hmm.
You get different kind of access, different kind of cats and women, guys and gals involved. So you just get, I felt like more compelling stories.
Yeah.
Because I came in not knowing anything about it and not liking it, and in the least, to knowing quite a bit about it. And while I didn't, I think I started liking sprint car racing quite a bit. But everything else, I could take it or leave it. But I love telling the stories, and I love the fact that people really appreciated that you were telling their stories. And that's one, again, covering niche sports is that's really rewarding because people do really appreciate it. Not that they don't when you're at the higher tier or more high profile sports or programs or whatever. But I mean, that's really rewarding when you're, making a lot of people happy at a dirt track that you stayed at on a Saturday night until 1 a.m.
Right. And so you meet Chris through football. How does he approach you to join him at Cyclone Fanatic?
I think it was kind of like it'd be the perfect melding of the grizzled veteran and the young up and comer,
young guy,
which he still was. Excuse me. And now, of course, he's getting up there a little bit.
he's
the younger guy, and I'm the more grizzled veteran. But he's connected with people since that young age that have come up to his age with him too, right? So that's a huge factor, I think, in his appeal, and his relatability is incredible. And I thought, that's great. Yeah, let's do this. And, it shifted over time a little bit. I'd been in the business long enough that covering recruiting, the drudgery of it, I was not into that. I mean, I still feel like I got some good stories out of it, but the day to day, because at this time, my kids are still pretty young too. I didn't want to have the feeling of, I took my kids to a movie and a recruit signed and I'm in trouble because I come out 2 hours later, and Chris wasn't like that. But I knew it needed to be at some point somebody who could be more dedicated to that, and I could focus more on storytelling, which diminishes my role and everything else.
Yeah.
But it fit better. So that's kind of how it started, and yeah, had a lot of fun. The CCF build up even more since then, while traditional media keeps, and I think it's a terrible thing, especially on the news side, to be become almost irrelevant because we need objective information delivered to people. But it's an interesting dynamic because CF, as Chris will tell anybody, like any independent news or news, sports, whatever entertainment outlet, has plenty of challenges. But the challenges facing traditional news media now, from who owns them to declining readership and viewership and all that stuff, is kind of a night and day, situation.
How crazy is it for you to look back and, remember times when you were a news writer in that same newsroom and seeing what it's become now and how it's still evolving? I mean, unfortunately, like you said, there's still ways where it's kind of starting to crumble even more than it was before. Like, what's that like for you having been in there?
Well, it's disheartening, but it also, I mean, here's an example. When I came out at the Register, they were really, they gave us a tour. They did all this stuff. I remember how cool it was, the building, and they changed to a different office downtown. And that building is no more. They had a huge globe that was so cool that had little thing. I mean, it really, really, really mattered.
Yeah.
It was important. And love my colleagues that are still working there. But I mean, I came into a sports department that had its own separate little nook or area. We had like 9, 10 full-time people. Now they have what? 4, 5. And then we had a ton of part-timers too. God, we might have had 11 or 12, but it was, football Friday nights, we'd cover minimum of 6 local games probably, because we had people that would bring in from these regional sections called Around Town too. So we'd blanket any big games in the central Iowa we'd be at, and a couple others.
Yeah.
Maybe if we hadn't hit those teams or something. Now, I mean, they got out to one maybe, and then that's not a knock on the people doing it. It's just the amount of staff and the massive, the way resources have just vanished. And they took us out on that tour to their new printing plant in Norwalk. It was state of the art. They had all these people out there. We're printing this. Well, they closed that years ago. They don't print, like most newspapers, they don't print their own stuff. It goes through somewhere else. So therefore deadlines are earlier. So it's just like seeing what was a really big, oh, look at us, we got this, and then they eventually close it.
Yeah.
It's sad to see, but I mean, they're going along. And again, I really like the work that, most of them are not former colleagues anymore, especially now that Randy's retired.
Yeah.
But they've been colleagues, since then. And I really appreciate the work they do now. But I mean, it's a completely different world. It went from prestige to kind of like, it's like people complaining because it's like, you're not covering this event, or you're not covering this event. Well, you're all in on Iowa and Iowa State, but what happened to, they're getting it from a lot of different areas, and there's really nothing they can do about it because those are corporate decisions. And that's tough to see.
Crappy part, right? Yep. Someone who isn't on the ground, who understands the community, isn't really calling the shots. So I do hate that part of newspaper. And it's crazy because like I remember when I realized that I wanted to be a journalist, it was like I feel like that's all everyone dreamed of, was being in a newsroom. And of course media has evolved. We can cover sports in a vast majority, like just a very different ways from what it used to be. But I feel like newspaper is just very different now. Like I feel like it's surprising when people are like, oh yeah, I want to be a newspaper writer.
Yeah. And I mean, there's still good jobs out there. I mean, the Gazette, who I work for, independently,
you're still in the newspaper
owned. They've weathered these storms better than most, it feels like, in part because of that. Excuse me. And a lot of really good people working there. But I mean, it's a completely different world. And I don't think it's a better world, but it is the way the world has evolved, whether it was, not necessarily organic, but it's kind of where we're at, and happy to be doing what I'm doing.
Talk about what was the transition like from being a newspaper writer where, like you said, deadlines. You worked under very strict deadlines. Like that is a world I don't understand. I've never worked under a deadline, to be honest. I'm very fortunate, I would say. What was it like going from that structure to then working at Cyclone Fanatic, where it's obviously much more gray than black and white?
It was a transition at first because I would find myself almost procrastinating, like trying to make my lead too perfect or something like that, which you can't do when you're on deadline.
Right.
So I stopped doing that because, again, people want stuff still fairly fast. I don't care if my lead is boring. Like I've done a lot of the leads of, how many times Bill Fenley saved my butt on deadline, because he'd say something super interesting.
Yeah.
And he can just say Bill Fenley sat at the podium and smiled, or Bill Fenley sat at the podium and cracked a joke. Well, that's not a great lead, but it gets you a great quote. So it can turn into a great story, or at least a very, very enjoyable story to read. Those are some of the tricks. So the hard thing, was just trying to realize, okay, I'm not under this pressure, which was wild. I mean, at times, one of my craziest deadline moments was I was writing for the Gazette only at the time, covering Iowa State and San Antonio NCAA tournament. And as we're in the locker room doing interviews, we get the news that George Yang's broken foot. He's done after they'd beaten North Carolina Central.
Yeah.
The bowels of the Alamo Dome, it's impossible to communicate with the copy editors at the Gazette. I got to get something in that mentions this because I've sent my story. You know what I mean? You have to send sometimes lousy stories with no quotes because you got to get it in print.
Right.
Somehow an email from this person got to me, and I was able to get there quick enough to get
Yeah.
something up, a standalone little league, you break it out, kind of, oh, by the way, star George Yang broke his foot and he's out the rest of the tournament. And then they go and beat North Carolina. And then, of course, really nice effort against eventual national champ UConn, a great Dustin Hogue game. So in Madison Square Garden. So deadline was crazy, but it was also kind of fun.
I was going to say, do you ever miss that?
I still get it because when I'm writing for the Gazette, I got a hit, So I still get it, but it's not the same because when you're younger, it feels like everything's riding on it and it's more important than it really is.
Yeah.
So there was incredible adrenaline, but it also, one thing about this job is it's hard to shut off when you're done. And because your mind's been going, and when it was deadline, there was that added pressure. And even when there isn't, when you're on fumes because it's an 8 p.m. kickoff, the game ends at 11:30, you're finishing up writing at 1 something, you're just fried to some extent. So a little bit of that exists. It's just not the same kind of exhilaration as it used to be. But that's wild. I've always said, I didn't realize when I was reading the Register, and I'd be like, well, that's not a very good story. When I was 16, well, that actually is a great story given the deadline pressure. I know, Rick Brown or Randy Peterson or Dan Johnson or somebody was under at those times. And you come to realize that once you're in those spots. I've always said, unless you're in a spot where you absolutely have to get a story to someone in 15 to 20 minutes on something that, and we had dial-up internet to send it over. We sent it over phone lines sometimes.
That's crazy.
That's the type of pressure that most people kind of shut down, maybe stop. I think that's you got to have that. Now, is it worth much? I guess not, but it's still, it's a unique and kind of fun to be able to find a way to get through that. And you can't shut down.
Yeah.
You don't have that option. You've got to get them something, and you got to try to not screw a bunch of stuff up. And you screw stuff up sometimes.
Yeah.
If I misspelled names, I put in the wrong first name because I remember a person with that first. And you don't have time to double check it. And they used to have lots of copy editors, and they don't now too. So it's even more on the reporter. It's just like I learned it. So you got to do a lot of self editing, and people don't bail you out that much. The Gazette, they'll bail me out occasionally, under a late deadline situation, which is nice, and I appreciate that. But again, not nearly as many of those people there to catch things as there used to be. But so it was fun and scary at the same time, like kind of like a horror movie. So those are always fun if you're into horror movies.
I know. I'm trying to think if I've felt that type of pressure, and I think the most recent I can think of was the gambling news, because I knew all the football names that started trickling in, and I was just like, oh gosh, I hope a wrestling name doesn't drop. And then we saw how it all played out. Once Pinero's name came out and the dollar amount, I felt like a panic. So I was like, what do I do?
Yeah.
But no, that's crazy. You mentioned you covered racing, NASCAR. You were doing stuff with that. What all have you covered?
Oh, events or sports?
All of them.
Biggest events probably Indy 500s, cup races in Kansas. When Iowa Speedway was just getting going, they'd send us Register would send me to cup races. Knoxville National. You can't Knoxville Nationals, even though it's whatever 25,000. It's not like the Brickyard, but it's still a huge deal and a really cool thing they've got in Knoxville and for sprint car racing. I haven't covered a college football playoff game. I haven't covered many pro events, but marquee pro events, but a lot of big, huge college football games. The 2011 Iowa State broke up, it killed the BCS by beating Oklahoma State on that day where tragically, I think Oklahoma State had lost women's basketball people. That was a surreal situation. But a lot of big games, but not necessarily. I mean, at Sweet 16 in Madison Square Garden with Spike Lee running around and all that, that was pretty cool too, to be at some of those historic venues. Boston Garden, as a Celtics fan, to be TD Garden, whatever they call it now.
Yeah.
that was pretty cool to be there for this Sweet 16 too. With the not quite good enough comeback against Illinois. I feel like if they hadn't played so poorly early on, I think they would have gotten past that game. But I don't think anyone's getting past UConn though in the next round. But a lot of fun events, just about every sport you can think of.
Okay.
I've covered.
And what's your favorite? When you think back, what if you could do it again, what would you go back and do again?
I think my favorite sport to cover is football, which is interesting because as a decent athlete growing up, I was best at baseball, next basketball, and football. I was too lanky. I mean, forever. I mean, like my son is right now. I mean, I could eat anything, the worst foods, and I wouldn't get anything. No
Nothing.
Nothing. But I also couldn't fill out that much too. And I think football has been the most enjoyable thing for me to cover, to be honest. And college football in particular, preps can be it's rewarding, but it's also extremely challenging because it depends on the situation. Can you keep your own stats? Can you keep them effectively? Because you've got to get from point A to point B, make sure you can get the interview. You always feel like you've missed something in those situations because you've got to do so much. College football gives you plenty to do, but they also get you enough stuff done for you that you feel you're not missing anything. If I hadn't gone to the bathroom, I wouldn't have missed that 20-yard run that it aren't in the stat sheet, that I had.
Yeah.
But you got to do what you got to do. But I think football's been my favorite thing to cover.
So from your perspective, I mean, Chris is pretty, upfront covering the realignment and all the craziness of that. What's that been like for you? Even just, as a fan, watching how much the college athletic landscape has evolved. Like, what's that been like for you?
I kind of like the traditional news media. It's disheartening to me. I mean, the positive development I would say is that players get paid. I think that should have happened long before that, and it wouldn't have been the mess, the so-called "quote unquote" Wild West it was if the NCAA hadn't dragged its feet forever and ever and ever, trying to preserve the amateur model, which was great for TV, great for people making lots of money in the NCAA and its institutions, but not great for players. And to see TV dictate so many things, like I think the fact that there's no Pac-12 is terrible for college sports. I do. I think the fact that Brett Yormark has been aggressive and proactive and trying to do everything he can to make sure that the Big 12 stays relevant, and he's done that. Obviously the SEC and the Big 10 have separated themselves financially and in every other way, but you're right there, and now you got the ACC teetering. It's interesting, it's intriguing, but it's also kind of like Pollard said that one time, over the tailgate tour. I mean, at some point you're watching people eat their own.
Yeah.
And all for, I feel like short-term gains without necessarily caring about the long-term ramifications. So that's, if stuff gets to the point where regional rivalries don't matter at all, I think college sports loses its appeal to the vast swath of people who care about college sports. However much money you've got pouring into some quote unquote super league or something, it won't matter because people won't want to consume the product.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Do you think it's changed the way we cover sports, the way realignment is moving? I think we still have a little bit before we really feel like a drastic shift in terms of us showing up to cover these teams. But do you think it's changing how we do our job?
I don't think so. I think once you get into the game week, I mean, that's it. Again, it doesn't matter what level you're at or what the situation is. You've got to there's a game to be played, and there are intriguing elements, storylines in advance of that game.
Yeah.
Or season, all those types of things. And so I don't think it changed the way I approach anything. It's just, you don't, some of that stuff is in the back of your mind sometimes. It's like, oh, it's kind of wild to see that they're playing BYU on the road in football, in
Yeah.
a conference game, that type of stuff. But some of that is fun and cool, but until you realize what the reasons behind it.
Hmm.
And when when you reconsider, or, it's like, oh yeah, well, this is kind of ugly, but there are some neat aspects to the newness of certain things, and that's a positive. But in terms of the day to day, I don't think it's changed my approach in the least.
Yeah, that's a good segue in that I was going to ask, how do you feel about covering this season? I mean, there's new teams mixed in, some new road trips on the calendar. How do you feel about that change?
Well, I think it's exciting, and I think for Iowa State, you already had, excuse me, this is a season where you get 5 home games,
Hmm.
4 road games in the Big 12. Kansas, recent success for the first time in a long time, leads to renovations at their stadium. They're playing some games at the Sporting KC um, soccer complex, and then they're playing at Arrowhead. So
Yeah,
Iowa State, we know how they like to go to. Iowa State fans like to go to Kansas
love to
City,
travel.
and you get Kansas and Arrowhead. So, while there are obviously being Kansas City, a lot of Kansas fans, and they're rightfully excited about the trajectory of the program with Lance Leipold. Leipold. I mean, there are going to be a lot of Iowa State fans too, so it won't feel like a true road game. So your
Yeah.
tough true road games are West Virginia, Utah, which is a really tough one, and
Hmm.
top of my head, I can't remember the other one, but it's eminently winnable. So, I mean, sets up really well for Iowa State, but we've seen seasons that look like they set up really well for Iowa State and they don't. We've seen seasons where it looks like, oh my gosh, how are they going to get this many wins? And they go reel off 8 wins.
Yeah.
So I think that's, from a fan perspective, it should be really fun, I think, to be a fan of Iowa State, because you kind of never really know. There's always suspense.
Yeah.
And, when stuff does break, great. It feels kind of magical.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't, you feel like you were kind of snake bit, the usual type of stuff. But I mean, I think the Iowa State fans have learned to truly, truly appreciate the good times and revel in them, because bad times are rarely far behind, it feels like.
That's the curse, right? The curse of Iowa State fans.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, from a men's basketball, women's basketball, wrestling, football perspective, I mean, it looks like this is going to shape up to be
Yeah.
a heck of a season, on paper going in, given what all the teams have.
Hmm.
But, from the football side, Utah, I if they do not make the Big 12 title game, I will be shocked. They will have to be decimated by injuries again. The Utes will. Kansas State's really tough. All these teams have really built themselves back. Even the middle of the road, bottom of the barrel teams have built themselves back with a lot of transfers.
Hmm.
And some of the schools with a lot of resources, like the Texas Techs. I mean,
Yeah.
Baylor's been bad. I mean, Dave Aranda barely saved his job, but I mean, he changed everything up, changed his offense. He's calling defensive plays again. They always bring in talent. You never know. That's the thing about the Big 12, kind of like Iowa State. You never know how it's going to break. No one saw, COVID year or not, Iowa State getting the Big
Yeah.
12 championship game in 2000, damn near, winning that thing against Oklahoma.
Because
Having
were
a
you
chance.
there?
I was not. We did
Okay.
not. I don't think. Yeah, I wasn't being sent to that. And I know that there were, of course, no fans, which you
Hmm.
finally get to a New Year's Six Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, and
Right.
against Oregon, and no fans can go. But it's kind of the curse of Iowa State too.
Yes, it really is. No, yeah, I'm very excited. The Big 12 is looking real good. So I think those games will be fun to cover from our side of the world. And I'm excited to see how the heck we go about it. Chris is starting up his let's get fired up chats with us. So
Yep.
when you look back, and I don't know how easy of a question this will be, of all the sports and events, that you've covered, is there an athlete that you would say was your favorite athlete you covered?
Excuse me. Um, there are a number, I would say, but one that stands out is Jake Knott.
Okay.
A guy who loved to Matt Campbell talks about wanting guys who love football. That guy loved football. Had a chance in the pros in unfortunate situations, injuries, and whatever happened, with the, PED thing, and all that. I mean, a guy who battled injuries, a guy, local guy, went through Waukee. He was a Kansas City guy too, but I mean, played the bulk of his time at Waukee. Really nice kid, smart kid. Couldn't finish out his last year. I think that 2012 team could have had a couple more wins if he could have stayed healthy, but he did help them get bowl eligible and played a big role in it. And he was all tearful. He had a news conference, came over and thanks every single media member for how they covered him. And that was just class act all the way. And he once told me that a number of my stories from the Gazette were framed like in his parents' house.
That's awesome.
That I'd written, and that, I mean, that touches you. I mean, selfishly, that makes you feel good, right? But I mean, so many guys have been fun to cover. I mean, the Monte Morris, George Niang, Naslong, list goes on and on with some of those guys were a lot of fun. And there were countless high school kids I covered and people I covered that were going through some tough stuff. That's meaningful. But there was something about Jake in the appreciation he really felt and shared for us, which we don't get a whole lot of. That was really special. So I'd say Jake Knapp was my favorite to cover.
What makes your job worth it? Like, what makes you continue to do it?
Well, I get to go to sporting events and write about them. I mean, I don't get to tailgate. I don't. Well, my brother-in-law makes fantastic ribs, and he'll do one at every tailgate every year, and so I'll go and do that. But I don't get the full tailgate experience, and everyone knows what that means. So people are like, "Oh, you get to go to all these things." Yeah, but I've also got to work.
Right.
And
it's still our
there's
job.
also stress and there's also this, but it's pretty cool to be able to, go, went with my in-laws and some their friends to go and do some things around Chicago when Iowa State played at DePaul. And it was a really cool experience to see that and to do the things around it. And, I was told I didn't need to cover it, but I'm like, I'm there, I'm going to cover it, and, kind of neat to see event, it was almost all Iowa State fans. And it was kind of sad because DePaul had a great band playing really cool, like Earth, Wind and Fire tunes and all that.
Yeah.
And a good setup, everything, but virtually no fans. But it's rewarding in as much as you get to do what you do. There are a number of people that will express the fact that they appreciate what you do and how you do it, knowing that you're never going to be perfect and sometimes you're going to suck.
Yeah.
Just like in anything in life, or stories I've read, I'm like, I really didn't have it on that one, but it's just, like covering sports is like playing sports. It's a microcosm of life. You're going to succeed, you're going to fail. If you're smart, when you fail, you're going to not just get mad and throw things at the wall. You're going to say, why? Why did that happen? Why? Maybe I can improve this or do this or do this or do this. You seek solutions and you get curious about the problem. You don't just get angry and feel like, oh, woe is me. I think it just gives you all those elements. When you write a really good story and people tell you how good it is, it makes you feel good. It's all that stuff wrapped into one. There's adversity. There's, it's got all those elements. And even though we're doing this or this or, this, I mean, it's always still exciting.
So 25 years. I'll ask you one last question. If you had to give advice, what advice would you give after 25 years?
You have to really love it and recognize that anybody in this business, particularly on the newspaper, radio, TV side, is going to pay you as little as possible. They're going to, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
And, if you can, I think people separate themselves by going beyond and building their own quote unquote brand. And I know whether it be through social media and all of that. So it makes them more dispensable for whoever they're with. But it, my advice is to never stop being curious about it and never think that you've got it figured out. Because if you do, you'll quickly find out that you don't. Treat everyone great. I mean, that's a big thing for me. When I see new people, I try to, talk to them, introduce myself, because, there are less and less new people, let alone old people in the business. So,
yeah.
So, the kind of things I think that are key to anything is, you got to love it. You got to recognize that it's not going to make you rich unless you're got some type of crazy personality that translates to something, way on the national scale, up on the national scale. And even then, there's no guarantees that it's going to stick. But and recognize that the relationships are what matter, and you gotta, even though people are your quote unquote competitors,
right?
They're also your colleagues, and everyone should be pulling together, even while trying to outdo
right
the other folks. But that's my advice. It might sound corny, but be kind, be appreciative of what you got, be grateful for what you got, and do everything you can to differentiate yourself from the competition, and be yourself, and ride with that and see where it takes you.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, Rob. I really appreciated this.
Well, it's great to talk to you, Jackie.
It's great to talk to you and hear about all of your experience. I forget how much you've done. You've literally done so much.
Yeah. It's when you do it this long, yeah, kind of comes with the territory. But yeah, it's been a mostly fun ride.
Well, thank you for joining me. I'm really excited for this season. I'm excited to see what all the work that you do and what we can do together as a team. And yeah, thanks again, Rob.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thanks to, of course, our sponsor, the Ivy College of Business, who are huge supporters of us at Cyclone Fanatic. So thanks for listening, guys.